All right, it's the garage door. I'd like to welcome John Bermuda Schwartz to the garage door in the garage. John,
thank
thanks
you
for
very
joining
much.
us tonight. Yep.
Welcome,
Thank you
John.
so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So, John, you and I've met you a few years ago at the Chicago Drum Show, and have been a fan since I saw you on the Tomorrow Show. I think with Tom Snyder, if I remember, weren't you on that? Is that correct? With Al?
Yeah, that was my first and Al's first national TV appearance. That was
Wow.
April 21st, 1981.
Wow.
Okay. And you
So
guys, what did you play? I've forgotten now. I know, but
Well, the song at the time that kind of broke Al at that time was "Another One Rides the Bus," a parody of Queen's "Another One Bites the Dust."
So, did you have any interactions with Mr. Snyder at all?
I didn't personally. I suspect Al probably shook his hand or something like that. But we just sort of were, here, go in. Okay, you're on. Okay, that's it. Go get dressed or whatever. And so it was kind of in and out. I suspect he met him. I did not, though.
For those of you who don't know, the Tomorrow Show was like a late night show after Johnny Carson with an interesting interviewer by the name of Tom Snyder. So it was kind of the show out there for later night viewing, I guess. Was that a good summation, Bermuda?
Yeah, Snyder was great because he was sort of there's a couple of hosts like that where they just sort of they're a little not quite educated, or they play a little bit dumb, and they really sort of play into the hands of their guests. So the guests always look really, really good, and they always look smarter than him. Yeah, yet everyone, nobody thought he was stupid. Everyone really wanted to do the show. It was a great show to be on, and people did stay up for it. So it was pretty cool.
Did you see the John Lennon one?
Not at the time. I've seen
The
tapes
clips
of that, of course, YouTube of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, John, a little bit. You're a Chicago native, is that correct?
Yeah, I was born on the north side at Edgewater Hospital, which is I think something else now, and we lived in the Ravenswood area. And but I was very young when we left. I mean, this is all stuff I learned later on in life. And
Sure.
Around 1986, I went to the NAMM Summer NAMM, which was still at McCormick Place then. And I had a car, and I drove around, and I drove past my old apartment, and it didn't register at all. I didn't remember a thing.
Yeah.
So that's ancient history. But I am technically a Chicago native.
Well, of course, being a Ludwig endorser, it has to be. That's the connection.
Well, there was a connection, as a matter of fact, and this is, if I don't know if you're going to get to this, but this is how I got into playing drums.
Yes.
Is when we lived in Chicago, my father was in advertising, and he did something for the Ludwig Company. He did something with Bill Jr. and cooked up some kind of an ad or a campaign or some kind of thing. And I don't know what it is, and I never asked my dad, and I never asked Bill Jr. I mean, I had the opportunity, and long gone for both of them. But instead of being paid, my dad bartered out, or Bill bartered out a snare drum kit, and it was a blue and silver Duco snare and a stand and a Macintosh bag and a Haskell-Haar record and a book, probably brushes, sticks, a practice pad, and bartered out this kit. But it wasn't really, that was cheap for him, but he really cheaped out. This was a snare, and it wasn't in any catalog, and he didn't put lugs on it. It was just a rod that went through, so it wasn't drilled for lugs. It was just a rod that went from the top, single flange hoop to the bottom, and literally screwed into like a little hex nut at the bottom. And that was it. That's how the drums stayed together. The only thing drilled in was the throw off and the butt plate. So it's actually a very rare snare. Well, I didn't know that at the time, and I did all sorts of terrible things to it and later in life. But it was a very rare. It was a one-off because he was too cheap to put 6 lugs on it. So it would.
That's the chief.
Yeah, the chief, right? So that would have been a very cool thing to have kept. At any rate, so my father then, as probably Bill hoped he would do, went ahead and bought a matching bass drum and a ride tom, as they called them back then, and in the same finish, of course. So that was for my brother to learn to play drums, and I believe he took lessons with Roy Knapp in Chicago, who was a famous, teacher.
Yeah.
He was the Freddie Gruber of Chicago. So he, started taking lessons there. We moved to Phoenix in 1960, and my brother continued drum lessons there, and then switched to guitar. And I inherited his drums, the 3-piece, 1 cymbal, a Wahlberg hi-hat with two 12-inch big cup cymbals on it. Oh, it was terrible. And gradually, as I began, learning, and this was in 1965, I started taking lessons on the kit. And we gradually added like a real cymbal and real hi-hats and stuff like that. But I mean, it stayed the three-piece for forever. I mean, I really wasn't able to, you didn't know about adding a one-off floor tom in those days. So I lived along with those three pieces for several years. I got my first brand new kit later in 1968, which was a Ludwig standard. So my experience with Ludwig as an artist now, of course, goes way back literally to the beginning, and does have an actual Ludwig company, Ludwig founder connection. So that's a very cool thing.
Very cool.
John, to me though, that some of your style, to me, you're going to make do with what you have there and a lot. So maybe having that, and a lot of us did, I can remember banging on a camber. I had a camber cymbal, and a Slingerland tom, and that was it. But I think a lot of that has lent itself to what you do with Al. I always thought I mean, for you, Bermuda, it's like you're an emulator in that 1 minute for one song, you'll sound just like John Densmore. The next time you may be Ringo, so how do you do that? First of all, that's a question I want to throw out there. How do you do that?
Well, for one thing, let me say that, for anybody that says, well, you don't have a style, you're just copying all these other drummers. And it's like, well, yeah, to an extent I am. But it's more than that. I'm not just playing what they played. I'm playing what they would play if you were to call in John Densmore. It's like if Al called him in, Al called in on that track, which was Craigslist. He called in Ray Manzarek to play keys. And not to play parts from, specific songs, but it's like, how would you, if this was the Doors doing this song, what would you play? Right. And I had to get into sort of John Densmore's head. Well, if John was called in on this session, what exactly would he play so that you would know it was John Densmore? So, for me, I get to be all these different drummers, which is tremendous fun because I grew up listening to a lot of them. And how I do that, I listen. I mean, I listen really carefully, and sometimes these guys are not that difficult to emulate. And other times I got to work at it. I had sort of a background. I listened both to Ringo and other stuff on the radio, and also like Gene Krupa records back in the 60s. And so I had a little bit of kind of big band influence. I don't say I could play that stuff, but I knew of it. And I did sort of play along to those records and things like that. And when it came time to do a song called a parody of Zoot Suit Riot by Cherry Poppin' Daddies, which was part of that big swing revival for a while.
Yep.
Our song was Grapefruit Diet. And all of a sudden I had to do kind of sing, swingy, sort of stuff. And I play a lot of swing and shuffles into that, but I mean, that's really not my forte. And I had to work on it. And I met the drummer, after we, Tim Donahue. I met him sometime after we released the song. And he says, oh, how'd you like doing that song? It sounds pretty good. I said, man, you're hard to emulate. That was hard for me. He says, no, it's easy. And I guess whatever you do seems like it's easy, but for someone else to do it, that's hard. I mean, if Buddy Rich came in to play 2 and 4 at straight eighths, he would probably think that was impossible.
Right, right.
I mean, I can't do what he does, and I don't think he can, or he certainly wouldn't do what I do. So, it's all about perspective. But in emulating and sort of being all these different drummers, it's been a lot of fun for me, and it's been an education. As we continue to perform live Grapefruit Diet, I got much better at the whole sing thing, and so I mean that's an area that I've tackled that I'm a lot more comfortable with. If we were to commit something like that to a record again, I would be a lot better than I was 20 years ago or whenever that was.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think you have a distinctive underlying feel. Maybe not. I wouldn't say sound per much. I mean, the sound's so controlled now by what goes on in the studio and stuff. But
yeah.
But a feel, I definitely think you have a certain feel. Oh, that's Bermuda, to me, to my ears.
Oh, well, thanks. I hope it's a good feel and not one that says, oh, that sounds like hell. That's got to be Bermuda. Again, on all these gold and platinum albums. You'd think Al could afford a better drummer.
But now, you guys, correct or not, you started on Dr. Demento, you and Al?
Well, Al did. Well, we both did, but separately from each other. That's a whole other story that leads up to how I happened to meet Al. But Dr. Demento started his radio show, I think in 1970 or 71 here in LA, and it was just an LA show. And he's a musicologist, so he played all
Yes.
sorts of obscure jazz records, some novelty stuff, but a lot of stuff that was all out there and that was historical or that was lost maybe to history, and sort of brought that to the listeners. So it was sort of a wacky, crazy show. And both Al and I got our recorded introduction to the show at the same time, as it happens. This was early 1973, and Dr. Demento, and of course all of my friends listened to the show as well.
Yes,
and
we did
Dr.
too.
Demento
Yeah.
had a contest, and there was a song called Pico and Sepulveda by Felix Figueroa. It was an old 78, I think, from the 40s, and that was not his real name. I forget who the guy was, but he was like a legit band leader, and this was just sort of a pseudonym so he could do a novelty song. And Pico, the streets Pico and Sepulveda, there's an intersection in West Los Angeles, which actually I live not far from. And so the song was about that, and he named all the streets in Los Angeles, La Brea, Cahuenga, tar pits. Anyway, so that was always the #1 most requested song. So Demento just sort of he just sort of had enough. He says, I'm not going to play the song again. I want all you guys who are of the mind to create your own version. It was literally the roll your own Pico and Sepulveda contest to record a version and send it in. And the winner would receive a 78 of the Felix Figueroa recording, and there were some other prizes and stuff like that. Anyway, my friends, and I didn't know any guitar players really or bass players. I was in school band, so I knew horn players, sax players, trombone, flute. I mean, I knew those were the players. Those were the guys in my first bands. Were all orchestral instruments, and we recorded a version, an instrumental version of Pico and Sepulveda, and it was pretty bad. Al, it turns out, who was also a big fan of the show, he and some of his friends recorded a version of Pico and Sepulveda as well. Now, I'll tell you what became of Al and what became of us. Well, first off, on our version, we had a sax player named Richard Elliott. I went to school with Richard. He became a well-known sax player, like a new age and a jazz sax player. I mean, when you think of sax players, you think of Kenny G, maybe a couple of others. And Richard Elliott is probably in the top 5, the sax aficionados. There was a guy on flute named Jeff Rona. Jeff went on to compose, I think, a lot of TV music. He worked out of the Hans Zimmer camp. I think he did underscore and stuff for Chicago Hope. He also was on the team at Roland that invented MIDI back in the 80s.
Okay.
So he did very well. He probably did better than all of us put together.
Hey, hello, how's it going? Remember me?
Yeah. Trombone player went on to be a well-known anesthesiologist here in LA. Anyway, it was another horn player went on to play in the Tonight Show band, Barry Keys, I believe. Anyway, everyone did really well, a lot faster than I did. Anyway, so we won. We tied for. Well, actually, we came in second in the contest. And because it was an instrumental version, Dr. Demento used ours for a while as the theme song because he could talk over it, the intro to the show. And so that was sort of cool.
Yeah.
Now, Al's version, Al recorded his version, apparently never kept a copy. Back in those days, he didn't think of that. I did. I still have the master tapes for everything I've ever done. But Al had a version, and Dr. Demento was speaking at his school, Linwood High, here in Los Angeles. So he decided he was going to meet Dr. Demento and handed him the cassette, for his version of Pico and Sepulveda. Well, Dr. Demento didn't have the heart to tell him that he missed the deadline. So the song was never in competition. We don't know what it sounds like. Dr. Demento put it in the trunk of his car, sold the car, and the tape is who knows where. So that's what happened to Al. That's what happened to me. Now, Al continued to cook up music, and I think by 1976, had begun sending in recordings to Dr. Demento, and gradually became, one of the fan favorites. And the show was beginning to open up to more homemade music as well at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I also sent a couple more things to Dr. Demento, which also got played in 74, and then again in 1975, and then sort of some time went by. Anyway, I was given the opportunity in 1980 to come down and see Dr. Demento do the show live, which was on KMET Radio, the rock station here in town. It was on Sunday nights. And I went down there.
John, excuse me, it was already syndicated by this time, wasn't it?
I think by 76 or 77, it went into syndication.
Yeah.
So now it had become a national show. That's actually, no, that's important. That's important as well. So Al was beginning to get known nationally, but on the Dr. Demento level. Also, I might add, at the end of 1979, Capitol Records put out his recording of My Bologna. So now he's got like a legitimate record deal. Well, it was one record deal anyway. I think they gave him $500 and they own the recording now.
Oh yeah.
So, but so I was invited to come down and see the show. I did, and it's the first time I'd met Dr. Demento. He says, "Oh, would you like to come back another time and do an interview? You know, now this show really caters to a lot of homemade music. You know, you were one of the first artists to have homemade music played on the show. Would you like to come back do an interview?" I said, that'd be great. You know, I can talk about my local bands and whatever. So I came back. It was September 14th, 1980, and Al was there, and he usually was there. He answered phones and you know, sometimes did songs live on the air and sometimes read PSAs. He was just sort of part of the cast. You know, Damascus was there, and you know, some others, and Ludacris Laurie, I think, Sulu, you know, some of the people. Musical Mike. Mike was the guy that played his hands.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
so the night I was there, I did my interview, which I have a recording that I probably didn't sound very intelligent. I didn't have a lot to say at the time. And Al was going to debut a song that he had just written that weekend. They were all out on a camping trip, as it happens. Came back to the station together, and he wanted to debut a song that he had written. So he asked if I would play his accordion case on this song, on this parody of Another One Bites the Dust, called Another One Rides the Bus.
Yeah.
So we went into one of the other rooms and rehearsed it, and sometime during the top 10, you know, Dr. Demento allowed 3 or 4 minutes for us to go in and play this thing on the air. Fortunately, Demento rolled tape on it. He rolled a quarter-inch tape while we were recording it, which he didn't normally do. He had air checks of the show on cassette, but for whatever reason, he rolled tape on that. Anyway, that song, you know, became requested starting the next week, but it also wound up on the syndicated show like 2 to 3 weeks later. And now suddenly Al is exposed to a much larger audience, and a lot of Demento was on like 190, 200 stations across the U.S.
Huge. Yeah, that's the first time I heard. About that time is the first time I heard Al and you.
So now we're getting exposed to Demento fans across the country, but a lot of these stations, you know, the morning drive guys, Monday morning, you know, the 5 to 10 zoo guys or whatever, a lot of them would listen to the Dr. Demento show and see what was wacky and crazy that they could pull off and play on their show. So now, the next morning, now Al, Another One Rides the Bus, is getting played in morning drive time in major markets.
Oh.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Obvious. I wish that was happening now. That was huge. So there's some buzz beginning to happen. In the meantime, Al goes back. He's back at school already. He went to Cal Poly University in San Luis Obispo, just a little north of LA. And he calls me up, you know, the week after that syndicated show runs. Oh, I forgot the most important part. So we finished playing Another One Rides the Bus that night. And I said, Al, you should have a band. I'll be your drummer. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Okay. And we swapped phone numbers. So anyway, now Bus starting to get played on morning drive. He's starting to get noticed. Demento's getting calls. You know, what's with this Weird Al guy? So he calls and says, you know, this was like a hit. I'm gonna get a manager. I'm gonna be home from school. I want to do some more recording in January. This was 1981 now. And we're going to put out an EP, and we're going to, you know, see if we can do some stuff. I said, fine, you know, I'm there. I'll play drums. So we did. You know, I think Dr. Demento actually financed that single. And gradually Al began to get more notice. And it was that single that kind of spawned our appearance on The Tomorrow Show, which was in April, which is a few months really, you know, after that was put out. TK Records, the Casey and the Sunshine Band label,
Yes.
I think as their very last single, put out Another One Rides the Bus. So now we had another thing out, and then they promptly closed their doors. And
closed down that company.
Yeah, things began. So things began rolling, and Al and I and some other musicians around began recording some more songs of his, and they were getting played on Dr. Demento. And by early 1982, he had an idea for a parody of I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett. Now I think at this point, he was already starting to seek permission just to make sure everything was cool, you know, for the airplay and all that. And in seeking permission, he spoke to a guy named Jake Hooker. Now, Jake was one of the guys and I forget the name of the band, but he was one of the co-writers of I Love Rock and Roll. It was not originally a Joan Jett song.
Right.
It was a song
right.
from sometime in the 70s. And I can't think of the name of his band. Anyway, Jake said, oh, yeah, that's very funny. You know, yeah, you can have permission. You know, I think I might be able to get you some recording time. But of course, you know, we have to I want one of my clients, Rick Derringer, to produce you.
Oh, wow.
And we'll. So Al is like, okay, and we're like, yeah, cool. So we go into the studio. By this time, we got a bass player, Steve J. And we went in the studio, and literally that whole first album was cut at Cherokee Studios in one night. We even beat the Beatles' "Please Please Me" thing. I mean, in one night we cut, like 10 songs, and
we did
another one
10 songs in 10 minutes.
Yeah, almost less than. Most of them were less than one take, and so we had to work hard. And
now, John,
let
me interrupt real fast. Had you been in the studio before?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
okay.
Not, I mean, this is not my first studio experience or my first band by any means.
Right.
Might have been my first time playing with, and Rick Derringer played all the guitars.
Oh,
We
wow.
didn't really have a guitar player. So the band at the time was me and Al and Steve on bass and Rick on guitar, which was pretty darn cool. So
Yeah.
I
Pretty
got an
good.
album
Pretty
with
good
Rick
band.
Derringer. Carmine, he was in a project with Carmine at the time, DNA, Derringer and a Piece. And he dragged Carmine along, I guess, to make sure we get good drum sounds. And so Carmine was fiddling with my stuff, and he's in there doing stuff. Anyway,
That's Carmine. That's Carmine.
Yeah. So and in the meantime, just as that was happening, we got a guitar player on board, but he just kind of missed doing that stuff. Well, and this was March of 1982. We cut the album. So the manager begins shopping it. Anyway, a few gigs come up. Now we have a band. Now it's Jim West on guitar, Steve J on bass, and me and Al. So we're a four-piece. I might add, that's the same band as today.
Really?
Without a break. On every album, on every tour, there are, and I'll take this opportunity to say there are two other groups that are still together, that are still making hit records. Our last album was a #1 album. Still making hit records, still touring, and that have been together longer than us. That's U2. It's a pretty good company. And ZZ Top. Also,
oh, wow.
Pretty good company.
Yeah, that's true.
And U2's last album was a #1 album as well, and ZZ Top had a top 10 album recently, and everyone's been out touring, so that's pretty good company. We're most people don't give Al the kind of, they think, oh, he makes up lyrics and plays accordion and he's wacky, and no, he's good. He's really good.
Yeah.
We're really good. The songs are really good, and we have
songs
a lot of
are good.
power.
The musicianship is good.
Yes.
It's intelligent. Sometimes it is sometimes it's topical, but it's not too topical, so it's dated.
Right. So we cut the album, and did some other gigs, and just sort of waited around till Al's manager, who was also Dr. Demento's manager then, got us a deal with, and all the record labels in town would say, well, this is really good. Someone's going to make $1 million on this, just not us. And finally, and this was the end of 1982, Scotti Brothers, who had Survivor, and they had some other legacy artists, and they had a couple of Felony, new wave band was on their label. They saw something. They thought, yeah, we can, and they were promotion guys. Tony and Ben Scotti were really promotion guys.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought, well, this will work, and they signed Al at the time. Now, most of the stuff on the album was already almost a year old at that point, and they wanted a couple of new songs. So we recorded Ricky, which was a parody of Mickey by Tony Basil.
Right.
Which was also not her song. That was a song called, I can't think of the name of it, but it was a song by a group called Racy. And it was very similar to what Mickey became, but I mean, Mickey was a parody, a cover of that. Anyway, so that album I think came out in May of that year, and the new songs I think were Ricky, and then also Buckingham Blues. And Buckingham Blues started out as a parody of Jack and Diane by John Cougar Mellencamp at the time, and John didn't want to do the parody. He didn't approve the parody, and we went through a few permutations of that till it turned into a completely different song. Instead of the ballad of Jack and Diane, it started as the ballad of Chuck and Diane, Charles and Diane in England, then it became the Buckingham Blues, basically with the same lyrics, kind of a bluesy sort of a deal. So those were the two new songs I think recorded for that album. Came out, and it charted, somewhere. I mean, it wasn't fabulously successful, but we did a little tour with Dr. Demento, and had a couple of videos from that album. Ricky was a video, and then I Love Rocky Road was a video. And MTV was still new at the time. This is 1983. They were hungry for videos. Al didn't take himself too seriously. and they ran the heck out of those things, and that was tremendous promotion. You know, I dare say that would happen today. I mean, it happens on YouTube, I
Right.
suppose, but you have to have someone promote that for you. You know, it's
Say
too bad there aren't
MTV's where
some.
I discovered you guys. So
Right, and they were really, really, really good to us, and
yeah,
really good to Al in that they would allow him to promote every new album with. He would take over the network for
yeah,
initially 4 hours, and he would do Al TV,
yep.
which I just happened to have.
Oh, very cool.
Oh yeah.
So he did Al TV, where he played, you know, a bunch of his videos. He chopped up legitimate interviews, which he got from MTV. He'd get the raw footage and then chop up these things,
Nice.
and then like ask, you know, inappropriate questions, and then they would answer in some other you know, out of context thing, and it became a whole different. And he did this for years and years and years with Ozzy Osbourne and Eminem, the guys from Def Leppard, and
Oh, yeah.
McCartney and Madonna, and he probably did 30 or 40 of these over time. Anyway, MTV was very, very important in us coming up, and later VH1 with well, Behind the Music and Driven, you know, so those networks, you know, were very important. But Al was also, you know, became more and more popular. We had a lot of gold and platinum albums, you know, when albums were actually selling, you know, and I might add that was not necessarily tied to chart success. We could have, you know, a million seller and it didn't even enter the top 20, you know, and then this last album we had was a #1 album on the Billboard Top 200 albums. And I think it was probably our very worst selling album. So it's just a relative, you know, chart positions are relative. Really nothing to do with how much money you make or how many records you sell, as long as you sell more than the next guy.
Right.
And in our case, that week, that was Jason Mraz, was neck and neck with us, and it's like, oh, are we gonna make it? You know, we thought we might have a top 10 album because our previous 2 albums were top 10 albums, and never ever would have guessed it was a #1 album. And then of course, then everyone wanted a piece of Al. Suddenly, Al had made it, and it was also another interesting landmark. That was the end of Al's record contract with. Scotty Brothers had sold off to a label that was under Sony back in 1998-99, and that was the end of the contract. So it's like, #1 album, see ya. And which, that's, you know, honestly looking back, it was a smart move, and we don't have any animosity towards Sony. They were very, very good to us.
Yeah.
Al
Right.
was very, very good for them. But honestly, with the way records are not selling anymore, product is just not selling. There's no point, you know, Al promotes himself. Al's there. You know, we can have a
Right.
tour without having an album. But having a #1 album led to 2 very, very lengthy and successful tours. I mean, we did very, very well. And, you know, by the time the album became #1 in summer of 2014, we didn't have a tour prepared. We couldn't really you can't just go on the road the next month. We're not
Right.
that kind of
Right.
act. So we went out the following year for 22 weeks. We went and did European countries that we hadn't played before. We went back to we usually go to Australia. That was a great time there.
I saw
Played a
you
lot
down
of-
in Louisville. I think it was Louisville, if I remember right.
I'm sure we played Louisville several times.
You played in Indy. That was mandatory fun, right?
Yes, we
Yes.
probably played there in 2015 and 16. We
Yeah,
came back to a lot of cities twice. We
My
played
daughter loves you guys.
Oh,
and,
cool. Oh, thank you.
And we went to that concert, did the VIP thing, and
Oh, cool.
we actually Weird Al was practicing with the camera. You know, he had the whole intro where he came in with the
Right,
camera and stuff, and
yeah,
he was in the parking lot practicing as we were walking in, and my daughter just froze. Like she loves him and wanted to say something, but she just couldn't. So he walked by us, and she just stood there and watched him go by. But she made us dress up. We had our Bermuda shirts and, you know, the
cool.
Hawaiian
That
shirts
was
and everything.
That was the first time we'd done anything like that in concert. Had Al on a.
It was amazing. You guys, I mean, that was nonstop energy the entire show.
It's a Broadway show.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
a lot. You know, it's intentionally funny though.
It was very
there's
impressive.
always something going on. Is for those who haven't seen us. I mean, there's, you know, we don't just play and then go to the next song and Al talks. And there's costumes
Yes.
for better or worse. There's videos going while we're playing. There's videos going during costume changes. It's like 2 hours nonstop. You sit
Oh, it
there.
was
And
a
there's just
definite
always,
production. Yeah.
always something going on.
You guys got to be
lighting
exhausted
is-
by the end of that.
Yes. Well, it's a show. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, you know, and me up there, yes, I have a major fan, keeping me cool, like a shop fan blowing on me.
Yeah.
That was, I should point out that with all the wireless technology and all the other stuff, Al was such a bug about not wanting any delay on the screen while he's coming in singing the song, that they literally had the camera on a cable that was already pre-run on his route. So it was already run up the steps in the audience that he was going to come down. It was run backwards from the stage, and they had 600 feet of cable, so there was no delay on the signal. What you heard and saw him singing, and if you were watching on the screen, everything was in perfect sync. It was great. So he's all about production, and he cooked all of that stuff up.
That was a very impressive opening. It really was. I've been to a lot of concerts, and that one very impressive. So.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks. And we do enough,
okay.
I was saying we do enough different kinds of music where, most of the fans are just Al fans, and they like what we do. But, inevitably someone gets dragged along. Oh, come, please come see Al, come with me. Or the parents and the kids want to go see, so the parents are now dragged along to their first Al concert, and they become fans. I mean, the demo, back in the old days, it was we were sort of like Monty Python and the Three Stooges and stuff like that, where it was a very male, kind of a teen male audience. And that's kind of how our audience was back then. And Dr. Demento, didn't have a lot of female appeal at the time. And we, so you could look out in the clubs and then in the theaters, and 99% of the audience was, males, kind of, teenage to maybe college age. We did a lot of colleges and stuff, not a lot of girls out there. And gradually over time, the girls started catching on. Over time, as our audience grew, and the younger kids, the 4 and 5 and 6 year olds, now they're 8 and 10 and 12, now they're coming to the shows. Well, after 30, 35, 40 years of this, now you got 60-year-olds in the audience, you got 60-year-olds in the audience, and it's a very wide demo, and it's very 50-50 male and female. And so it's a very mainstream audience. We become a mainstream act. The tours get better and better. Yes, we had 2 great tours on the #1 album. Take a year. We usually tour for 2 years and take a year off. This is our year off, by the way. Anyway, so
good timing.
Which is good, yeah.
20 toured again in 2018, 2019, but without any new product. So it's, some acts go out and do exactly what they did before. Al wanted to change it up. He says, well, we're not really doing any new songs, but we're going to change the way we do some songs, and we're going to change the theme of the show. So in 2018, we did there's an official name for it, the ill-advised vanity tour. It's the no frills tour. So no costumes, no video, no tracks, no nothing, just us.
Yeah.
Just us playing. Al had a MIDI accordion. He's now playing parts that that have to be filled in. He's playing parts for songs that he wrote that he never had to play before. So he had to learn all these songs. And the theme of the show was we were doing almost all originals. We pulled out like 50 original songs, a lot of which we'd never played as a band before. So we had to learn songs, and relearn songs that maybe we hadn't played in 20 or 30 years that we're now playing. And it's not enough that we're playing stuff that's never been played. He really wanted to make every show unique. So 2 things happened. One, every set list was different. We rotated the 50 songs. There were 66, 67 shows.
Oh, wow.
Like and every show was different. And so the fans never knew. Now, they kept track of what we did every night, and they put it all into this Excel spreadsheet. One person coordinated all the information. And so there is a list of every song. I mean, we have our set lists, but there's a list of every song we did. There's a list of who did a stupid solo that night. And so every night was different. Fans didn't know what they were going to get. So some of them they already come to multiple shows, but a lot of them came to multiple shows just to hear us do stuff. It's like, oh, I looked at the chart. He hasn't played this song in 7 or 8 or 10 shows. He's probably going to play it tonight. I'm going to go, so I want to see it play it live. But we did one other thing. We learned, 77. We did 77 shows. We learned a different straight song for every night, regular cover song.
Oh, wow.
Yes, we did Freebird. I Saw Her Standing There. Psycho Killer by Talking Heads.
Oh, yeah.
Deep Purple. What's the famous Deep Purple song?
Smoke on the Water.
School's Out by Alice Cooper. I did just 77
Wow.
songs. We learned 77 songs to play one time each.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's so
right
great,
there.
though,
That's
John.
it.
That is just so great. I
And of
love
course,
that.
they never knew what was coming, and we learned as best we could play them. I mean, sometimes, you know, we're an American band. We did Love Lies Bleeding, or actually the lead up to that by Elton John, The Funeral
Yep.
for a Friend. We did Classical Gas. We did Classical Gas in Eugene, Oregon, where Mason Williams lives. Now, Mason was invited to the show by Al. And this was, by the way, this was all planned out in advance. Nothing got changed. We knew before the tour exactly what song we were doing in what city.
Okay.
Mason
Okay.
had already
Yeah.
been set up for this show like 6 months in advance.
Okay.
He didn't know what we were doing. And we did Classical Gas, but we did, which was hard enough to do as a 4-piece, and Al on accordion, you know,
Right.
there's no strings or horns or, you know, and it's a tough enough song, but we did it. And by the way, we rehearsed these songs literally the day before we were going to do them.
Wow.
So we didn't play any of these, and some of them, you know, were bar band songs that we'd known
Right.
forever.
Right.
And some of them we had to actually learn, and we needed the rehearsal. So we played Classical Gas as a band the first time the day before we performed it, and probably ran through it, and was like, I was amazed that we had all, because we don't consult, we just sort of get together and play. And I was amazed that everyone had all those sort of off-time breaks in there. You know, it's one thing to memorize how they go, but when you make yourself a chart, by the way, we all had charts on this tour because we were playing stuff we hadn't really played in a long time, in addition to a different song every night. So it was we had rehearsals. So we had rehearsals every day, you know, sound checks evolved into rehearsals, sometimes for a couple of hours. And, you know, to do a show that was only 90 minutes, I might add. So we would rehearse longer than the show. Anyway, that was the theme of that tour, was something special. So he didn't write any new songs, but we did a lot of songs that were new to the audience.
But
The
John,
I'm sorry.
I was just saying, to me, that ties in what makes you guys, one of the things that makes you guys so great is your dedication to fans. I mean, your fan base is there, but it's also you care about it. You're not, I mean, and to me, that's kind of what the Beatles did. They did care about the fans. I mean, you know, they tried to give value for money, especially in UK and other parts of the world, you know, and a single wouldn't be on an album.
Well, right. Well, I mean, this is for the fans. I mean, we don't do this to amuse ourselves. I mean, I suppose Al did in the beginning, but he liked getting the attention, and he likes doing what they like. You know, if there's a song they don't, you know, that doesn't get a good reaction on tour or something like that, it'll get swapped out, or it'll get never played again. You know, or if somebody makes a comment about something that they think is a little too topical, he won't do it. On our last tour, and again, we changed up the theme. We didn't do anything new, but we changed up the theme of the tour, and this began the idea for the strings attached, having an orchestra in every city with us, which we're certainly not the first band to do that. You know, rock band to have an orchestra behind you. But this idea happened on the 2016 tour, or 2016. We played the Hollywood Bowl. We did 2 nights at the Hollywood Bowl. Now, that's a pretty cool deal.
Oh my gosh.
Except the deal was, and this was during the summer, the Hollywood Bowl's deal was, well, you're coming in, you're taking over our venue, our orchestra can't work. You're taking their work away. You have to hire our orchestra to play with you. You can't play the bowl, was basically it. You know, you tell us, you know, we'll write charts, but we want the gig. You know, you can't just not have us play at our own house. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And so they wrote out charts. They sent kind of a keyboard version of what the orchestrations were going to be. You know, this is what to expect when you hear us that night. We the first of the 2 days we played, we rehearsed with them, and it was flawless. It was incredible. It was just, we were, you know, they're behind us, right? The conductor's off to my side because he and I are working together. We're following each other's cues. Right. He's mostly following me. And he knows the show. He's heard the show on tape already, but he doesn't know who's hitting. You know, are we watching Al for this? Does a guitar player hit this? Do I hit it? Does he hit it? I mean, so he's watching me watching Al, you know, and this whole thing, the orchestra's watching him get ready to, you know. So it was flawless. It was incredible. It was incredible.
That's some pressure though, John. That's some pressure there.
Well, it was, and then it was like, wow, that's great. The second day we just came in and we just, you know, no sound check, no nothing. We just came in, did the show again, flawless. So Al thinks, oh, well, you give an orchestra music, it's going to sound like this. I want to do this again. Well, he'd already had in 2016, he already knew what we were going to do in 2018. By the way, in 2018, or early last year, he already knew what we were doing in 2021 to 22. So I already have like a basic set list for the next.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, Al's just, he's that way. So we, the 2019 tour became the Strings Attached tour. Now we had to, and I don't know if it occurred to Al or if it was something I said, but I said, you know what, you got to have, yeah, the Hollywood Bowl thing worked out the first time we saw the conductor, first time he saw us, it worked out great. That's a different level than the groups you're going to get in Wenatchee, Washington.
Right.
And certain places, you're going to get part-time players from a community symphony. They may not even be in season, and you're going to get an orchestra that doesn't know the show. Do you want to run the entire show that afternoon, to give him all the cues? I don't think you do. You don't want to do 2 shows a day. And I think he understood we have to carry the conductor. Now, an orchestra can respond to a new conductor better than a new conductor can respond to us, and us work with him, a different one every day. So it was actually a father and son conductor.
Oh, wow.
The father was Arnie Roth. Arnie is in Mannheim Steamroller, and also does scores stuff for video games and other projects and stuff like that, and has worked, I think, with some rock groups before. And his son is also a conductor, and not sure why, but they switched off. So we had one or the other. We had them both on hand, I think, for the first week of shows down in Florida. So they both learned the show. They both had conducted at least one show, and after that, everything was great. And we had a certain comfort level. They rehearsed the orchestra every afternoon, as so the orchestra would know what to expect. They played a recording of one of our shows of just the band playing live, and what to expect. So they would do their rehearsal, and then we would play with them for the first time at 7:30 or 8 or whatever the show started. That's when we first worked with them.
That's very
with
cool.
us. And almost every gig worked out. There were some notable orchestras in Nashville. We played with Nashville Symphony, great group. Normally there are about 40, 41, 42 people in the orchestra, including percussion, harp, a full orchestra.
Yeah.
And some orchestras were quite a bit bigger, 60, 70 people.
Where'd you play at in Nashville? John, where'd you play at in Nashville?
Was the Ascend Amphitheater, I think.
Okay, I didn't know if you played the Opry or anywhere like that or not.
We have before. We played the Ryman and the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh, very cool.
Oh, okay.
Before, and the Music Center as well in the past. But we've done the Ryman a couple of times. But this was the Ascend Amphitheater. This also, because we had the orchestra and it was a grander show, and frankly there was more expense to it, we were typically playing larger venues. We would normally play theaters or maybe 3,500 seat places, or maybe a 5,000 seat smallish, a shed or an amphitheater or something like that. But we were playing some, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12,000 seat places. So we were, a lot of that money went to the orchestra, but we did well. We did well as well. In Washington D.C. area, we played Wolf Trap, which we played before and sold out on our own. We played Wolf Trap with the National Symphony.
Oh, wow.
That was very cool. That was a big group.
That's impressive.
Well. That was cool. In Colorado, we played Red Rocks. We sold out Red Rocks, 9,000 seats. Nothing wrong with that. And with the Colorado Symphony, which was 70 or 80 pieces. And they were, the Colorado Symphony, and I can't think of the guy's name, but he was the guy who scored a lot of the charts. Now, we got all the charts that were from the Hollywood Bowl show. They gave us all the scores and all the individual parts. We added some new songs to that tour. Not new songs, we added some different songs, and those had to be scored. The conductor, part-time conductor emeritus of the Colorado Symphony, scored the balance of the music for that tour. So he actually got to conduct the orchestra at Red Rocks.
Oh, that's cool.
So he conducted one show. I cannot think of his name, but he conducted one show. And of course, that went really well because they're used to working with him. The hard part was because the weather was, it's outdoor venue. The weather prevented us from doing any kind of a real run through with the orchestra. We really wanted to, because now we're working with a new conductor. So we were ready to do the show with this new conductor that day. And because of the weather, we got through about 5 songs, and we winged it. We kind of winged it. What I did was I sat down with the conductor and the stage manager, who could give all the cues, who's going where, when, and all this, and could talk more about the logistics of the show. And I could talk more about the logistics of what our cues were going to be. I sat down with him for about an hour and went through page by page what was what. Our other conductors didn't do that. They didn't ask if he wanted help. He didn't ask them. He was going in cold.
Oh,
So,
man.
and it's a good thing that he and I and the stage manager sat down and had a chance to hash it out.
How was Red Rocks? I've heard stories that the acoustics can be tricky at times.
You know, honestly, I can't tell you. I haven't sat out in the audience.
Okay, yeah,
I'm seriously plugged in, and I really hear very little of what goes on
right. Okay.
in the crowd. The experience of playing there, and that's that we had played there before. We were on tour with the Monkees. It's the one time we went out with
Oh,
another
wow.
band. We opened for the Monkees. We had nothing else going on this year. We got asked out, and it's like, okay, you know, someone else can pay for the tour and just pay us a salary. We just kick back.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they were playing, you know, arenas and kind of amphitheaters and stuff like that then. So we played a lot of cool places. So we played Red Rocks in, I think August or July actually of 1987. So we had been there before, but not since. I mean, we really weren't, you know, yeah, we could have played there. They probably would have got 4,000 or 5,000 people in, but we were big enough after the #1 album and still a couple of years later
Oh, yeah.
to sell it out. That's 9,000 seats. That was great. And the experience there, you look out and it's the open sky. The weather was good that night. We didn't have any issues. And it's a sea of people. And there's these big rock formations that you look at, you know, on both sides.
Oh, wow.
There's rocks behind you. There's rocks that infiltrate the dressing rooms and the
Oh, wow.
catering area, and the whole backstage is just all kind of carved out of the rock, the existing rock. And
That's
it's
cool.
really, it's a very, very, it's one of the very cool places to play. And also for me, a cool place to play is one, a historic place. Two, if the Beatles played there, it's very cool for me to play there. And the
Yes,
Beatles
yeah,
played Red Rocks. Most
yeah.
people don't remember that when they think, oh, Hollywood Bowl and Shea
Right.
Stadium and stuff like that. But they played Red Rocks. Of course, Hollywood Bowl was a cool place to play, you know, as they had played there a few times. We played last year in the Strings Attached. We played Forest Hill Stadium. They also played. That was their other kind of venue in New York City.
And so did Dylan. That's where Dylan got a lot of booze. If you
Oh,
guys remember that. Yeah,
oh,
Forrest.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
You
Oh,
mean
yeah.
you mean Galug Galug Galug?
No, no, no. Boo! You
Oh,
went
boo.
electric.
Oh, sorry.
Boo!
Because you say booze, I think, oh boy. Anyway, so we played in London. We played the Hammersmith Odeon, where they had played, and a lot of big bands, Zappa, and you know, a ton of people played there. I mean, that was
That's awesome.
anywhere we played that major bands have played that I liked was very cool. In Seattle, the Orpheum, you know, where Elvis Costello had played, I thought was really cool. I just, you know, but that's just me. So
Yeah.
that's me. That, you know, but also some of these are, you know, Hollywood Bowl is a big venue. That's 18,000, you know, 19,000
Yeah.
seater. Now we
John,
didn't. I'm sorry. Just real quick, we didn't sell out either night at the Bowl. We did like 8,000 one night or 8,500, which is not
That's
bad.
pretty good. Yeah.
And we did like 11,000 the next night.
Oh, wow.
So we probably could have played one night and sold it out. And it's like, well, we sold out the Hollywood Bowl, or we did 2 nights at the Bowl. What sounds
Right.
better? And I think 2 nights at the Bowl sounded better. In addition, on the same tour, we came back, we played the Greek Theater, which is our normal LA venue. And that's like 6,000 or 6,500.
Mhm.
And we routinely sell that out. We've been playing
Yeah.
there since 1985. So we had played there. We played there on this last tour as well. So it's there's certain venues that are very cool venues, you know, and that's and not always big venues. The Bottom Line in New York City back in the day, you know, 400
Still.
seater was
Yeah.
a very historic, cool place to play.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so that's you know, so these last 2 tours, while we weren't doing anything brand new, we were changing it up, and that made those tours new.
John,
for
have
us
you
and
guys
the
played?
fans.
Have you guys played the Sullivan Theater, where Letterman was? Did you guys ever play there?
Well, we played there recently, not a couple of years ago, on the Stephen Colbert
Okay.
show.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we were in there, and of course I asked some of the older crew there. I said, okay, where was Ringo? And because they built out the
Right.
stage, they've changed the theater, so it
Yeah.
doesn't quite look the same. But I took pictures from the stage to the back of the audience, where you know you would see audience reactions on the Ed Sullivan Show, and there was kind of some entryways and pillars and stuff, you
You
know,
can
at
still
the
see.
back of the audience. I took pictures of those, you know, posted.
that's
Well,
awesome.
you know, here's the original picture. Here's my picture when we were there. Anyway, where Ringo was about 20 feet behind where we were sitting. He's back there. He's almost up against that back wall, and you know. So yeah, we you know, that was very cool. Oh, so again, another place where the Beatles had been. You know, yeah. So we got to play there, and we did Word Crimes, our takeoff on
Yep.
Word Lines, and that went over. And when we do TV shows, almost always we do them really live. I mean, we're live.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Now, John,
because
have you had a chance to interact with any of the Fabs? Have you met Ringo or Paul?
I haven't, and of course I would love to, and I have, I have the connections to do it. Certainly Ringo. I mean, I know Abe Jr., but I mean that's not, that's not a question you ask him.
No,
And
I wouldn't want to bug him. No.
that's
No,
not, you have to go sort of from through management or something like that, or through a close friend. And I know some people that know, Richie, as they call him.
yes, our Richie.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I haven't asked the question. If it was to ever come up, of course I would say yes. I was invited one time to come see a show. Come on, I'll get you back and say hi to Ringo. And I didn't do it, and I sort of regret that. But there's still time. I mean,
Well, they're on the John. They're on the drum forum. And by the way, I want to thank you. Craig's daughter Ella was kind of going through a rough time. If you remember, I reached out through the drum forum, drumforum.org, and you were able to get Al to sign an album for her. And Ella,
you
Craig's
did.
daughter,
Yeah.
just
Oh,
loves
good.
Al.
Good.
So
That's sadly that's worth less now. It's worthless less than it is if it didn't have a signature. Like you could probably sell that for 15 bucks. Now it's worth about 5 or 10.
Well, I will tell you, she's a drummer, and after seeing you guys, she now owns 2 accordions that she's learned to play. So she's a 17-year-old girl who plays the accordion and the drums. So
well,
kind of a rarity.
That's I'll tell you, I played before I inherited my brother's drums. I had taken accordion lessons also.
no.
So that was technically my first instrument. And about 20 years later, and I must have told that to Al or something, but it never came up again. And maybe sometime in the 80s, we were on stage during, just sitting around for some reason. I picked up his accordion and sort of by muscle memory kind of limped through one thing that I remember. He was amazed that I could make a sound at all, because I can't sing. I don't have any real melodic background. I mean, I can find a scale on a piano if it's all the white keys, and that's all I know. So I mean, I really have no melodic agenda. So he was just amazed that I could play this thing at all. I think that was also the last time I touched his accordion.
Well, John, real fast, I want to jump in and ask about some gear. I know you're a Ludwig endorser. What vintage stuff are you carrying around with you? Not necessarily on tour. I'm just asking about what you have in your collection.
No, I don't bring any vintage stuff. I mean, anything on tour. Not cymbals, not a snare, nothing. As far as vintage gear, I mean, I have a Victory kit from the 40s. The wood lug and all that stuff. That's it's just not something I play, but it's got its original calf heads on it and is in very, very nice shape. I've got a late 50s, a transition badge, black diamond pearl kit that's really, really nice with all nickel hardware, with its original Ludwig plastic heads, the play-on heads.
Oh, wow.
Except for maybe not the snare, but the toms and the bass drum, the floor tom, all have their original. And those are the heads that look kind of like they're sort of striated a little bit, the complexion. And they've got like stickers on them. They didn't even really imprint. They made up a bunch of stickers and then put them on there that said that. And I've got kits from the 60s. I got kits from the 70s. The 80s with the thick shells and the heavier hardware, sort of, I bypassed that a little bit. 90s kind of, nothing there. We're not hearing you, by the way. Didn't hear you, Troy.
Oh, I just said that. I don't like those 80s kits. Those 80 Ludwig kits, I just don't care for. No harm, no foul. People are fans of them, but
admittedly not a great era, drum wise, wood drum wise for Ludwig. And I think my next kit after that is probably a 2001, a one-off kit. It's a classic maple, and they were experimenting with like lacquer fade, so it goes from gray to maple. And it's not unattractive, nice. But they had it sitting in their showroom for a while out there in Monroe, and it was like, God, what an atrocious kit. So they sent it out to Todd Trent out at Ontario Music, who was their artist relations guy and also sort of one of the main Ludwig dealers in the West. And he housed a lot of the back line for guys. He had like a complete stock of just impossible stuff, parts and things. So they sent the kit to him, and I was friends with him, and I was out of this shop. This was before I was one of their artists, before he signed me actually. And he had it stacked up in his back room. I said, and I recognized, the lugs, of course, and the badges, but I didn't recognize the finish at all. I said, what's with that kit? he explained, well, that's an experiment. They sent it to me to sort of offload. I said, well, what happens to it now? He says, well, it's going home with you. So he made me a deal on that. I bought the correct hardware for it at the time, and that became one of my at-home kits. I was still an Impact Drums endorser at the time. I love my Ludwigs. I've been using a classic maple. I've used the Keystones on the road for a while. I actually, when I first got my Ludwig deal, which was in 2006, I mean, I'd been sort of a Ludwig owner and aficionado and player and lover all these years, and I did not actually sign up with them until fairly recently. So I started with the classic maple kit. I went to the Keystones because I really love, they have a certain punch, they have a certain bark, a little more power to them. And then we were in Australia one year, and I had a backline kit down there, a Ludwig kit, and it was a classic maple. I said, I remember these. These sound really good. I remember why I liked these in the first place. So I went back to classic maple on the 2016 tour, and I'd been using those. I used those in 2018 and 2019 as well. And in the meantime now, Ludwig has introduced the new Sonic line. Now, the new Sonics
I'm not familiar with the Sonics yet. I've seen them, but I haven't heard them yet.
Not new Sonic. New Sonic. It's one
okay,
word.
Okay.
And it's German,
Okay.
NEU. So it's like technically it's noise Sonic. So I don't know if they thought of that, but noise correct. The name of it is New Sonic, and it's a new, for them, it's a new shell layup. There's 3 plies of cherry on the inside, 3 plies of maple on the outside, thin.
Oh wow.
And then the finish, it's not really a wrap, it's put in the mold with these other 6 plies. So it's a 7-ply drum, of which the 7th ply is the finish, and it is bonded. It's not wrapped or glued or sticky or whatever. It is the 7th ply. And they use these little well, there's one there. They got these,
I like it.
The little Asian lugs. It's got, this finish is called Digital Black Oyster, or if you roll.
Pretty cool. I like that
black.
one.
And ironic, it did not come from a version of Oyster Black. It's not, we'll put it in Photoshop and highly pixelate it, and we got this. No, it came from in the Charlotte airport. Charlotte is near Monroe, or Monroe is near Charlotte. Yeah. In that airport, there's a big video wall as you go down the walkway, and it changes pictures and stuff like that. And one of the scenes it has is just this, it's got to be 100-foot long thing that looks like that.
That's very cool.
Took a picture of it, thinking it looks sort of like could be a drum finish. Anyway, it wound up being that.
How do they sound, John? Is it like a hybrid classic maple? Are they a little harsher, or not harsher, but more?
Look at that! He's got a matching.
I've even got a new Sonic, a digital black mask.
That's awesome.
Let me tell you about the sound. And I don't know if it was intentional. Well, of course, they don't go out of their way to make bad drums. If that happens, it's completely an accident. Nothing to do with it. No, they're really on their game. The new Sonics, the combination, the way the wrap is part of the shell. I mean, it's essentially a 7-ply, just a raw shell, if you will. The lighter lugs, the edges, just the way everything's done on this drum, they are incredible. I think, not to take anything away from the Legacies, which I love, and the classic maples and the Keystones, these may be their best sounding drums.
Oh wow!
They're really
How are the edges? Are the edges sharp? What are they?
There's a little bit of an outer bevel. It's a sharp edge, but there's a little bit of an outer bevel. So the head touches a little more of the shell. So there's a lot more meat. There's a lot more fundamental that you get from that. And it's a very classic older sound. I mean, I don't want to say it's boomy. I mean, they certainly have attack. You can gauge that by your head if you want, but they have a really warm, round, beautiful sustain, and a very, very, very full sound. They really sound just fabulous. Now, they introduced these 2 years ago at the NAMM show, the 2018 NAMM show, and I go and I work the booth. I go into NAMM on Monday morning, and I go in and I just help and just sort of be part of the thing. And also I get my hands on stuff and get a chance to work with them. So I'm very, very very familiar with how all of the drums sound and why they sound the way they do, and get to tune them. I mean, most of the kits in there are tuned the way I tune them. until somebody comes in and starts messing with it. But starting Thursday morning, those drums sound the way I want them to sound mostly. Same with their wall of snares. I go through and I tune all the snares. Nobody asked me to do that. They just let me do it. They leave me alone. And
That's cool though.
So I get very, very familiar. So I loved the new Sonics then. And I didn't do anything about it. And I thought, you know what, I want to grab one of these kits. I'll order one later, whatever. And then the next year come back. Now they introduced a new color. They introduced a coral red. You almost want to say pink, but it's not pink. You almost want to say salmon, but it's not really.
No.
Coral, you know, not pink. And I was in there, and I'm setting it up on the Tuesday, I guess. I'm setting up in the corner, and I tuned it up. I said, I want to grab this kit. I want to take this at the end of the show. If you haven't sold it yet. And he says, oh, Bob Rupp already bought it. I said, the show he's not even here. How the hell did he get his hands on this already? I thought, fine, I'll just order one whenever. And I never quite got around to it. But late last year, Uli sent me a picture of this finish. He says, this is what I got cooked up. I don't know, we're going to just show it and see what happens. Don't know if it's going to fly or not. I said, well, I don't care, because I love the finish, and I love the drums already, so I want them. I want that kit. If someone doesn't buy that kit off the floor, I will take that kit. Or
what are the sizes, John?
Whatever.
What are the sizes?
On this particular kit, it's a classic. It's a super classic.
Okay,
size.
22, 13,
They call
16.
it the Fab kit. So it's 22 by 14, 8 by 13, 16 by 16. They do not make a snare for that. Honestly, they don't need to. I mean, it might be a nice snare, but I'm using Supras. So
right,
yeah,
as are so many, Ludwig and
that's
other
all
guys.
You need.
That's all, Black Beauty or a Supra or a Copperphonic's a nice snare. Copperphonic.
Well, now do you have a jazz festival? I think you need to have a jazz festival. Everybody needs a wooden drum of some sort, I think.
I've got several wooden Ludwig snares. I don't know if I got a jazz fest. I mean, I have Pioneers, of course. I've got other classic maple wooden drums. I don't think I have a proper jazz festival though. Honestly, unlike Ringo, I like metal snares. Ringo always had a wood snare. He thought they were too brash or too bright or bangy or something. And it was rare that you saw him with a metal snare. I mean,
John,
really
while
rare.
I'm thinking of it, do you ever get a chance to talk to? Do you know Gary Astridge from the Drum Forum? He's the one that really basically rebuilt our Richie's drum sets when he put them up for auction and all that stuff.
Yes, I've chatted with him at NAMM. He was the one who introduced the Ringo reissue, that Jazz Fest.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's been to the last 2 or 3 NAMM shows and great guy, nice guy. He came out to see us when we played Niagara Falls.
Cool.
He's from that area.
Yeah.
No, it was great to see him. And yeah, I know him. Good guy.
Craig, do you remember him from the show last year meeting Gary?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay, John, real fast.
Go ahead. So real quick, so about the new Sonics though, when you ask what I'm playing, I want to take the new Sonics out on tour.
Oh yeah.
The problem is I need another drum, at least one more. I need the 12-inch because I always play, and for years and years, I've always played 12, 13, 16. And a couple of times I've thought, can I eliminate a tom and maybe bring the ride cymbal down a little bit where I don't have to, is there any way to do this? And I thought about all the songs we do. I said, no, I'm already short by only having 3 toms. But I got to have 3. There's times where I absolutely have to do obligatory roller on the drums. And I got to, even if I only hit it 2 or 3 times at night, I got to have that middle tom.
Right.
So there was no way to do that. As such, I can't just take this out as a 3-piece. Now, I will be playing this when we get back to playing gigs. This goes back out on the gigs. It's tuned up. It's ready to go. It sounds fabulous, and I can't wait to debut it.
Did Uli? Is that a prototype only, or is there going to be a 12 in production?
Well, Ludwig's a very by the book company. Let's say you can't just say, you know what, I want that wrap put on a different shell.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. This goes on these. And other wraps don't go on these. This doesn't go on other models. This wouldn't go on a legacy kit, for example. It's unlikely they would make me a snare for this. The thing is, they make other sizes in the new Sonics, but they are so by the SKU, the SKU number, their stock number, has a specific. Every drum has a specific stock number. Their 12-inch drums do not have a stock number that includes this wrap. This wrap is only for these 3 drums. And it's only for this year, I might add. It's only for 2020. So for them, he can't just call up and say, you know what, make me a 12-inch
Right.
and put that digital black thing on it.
Sure.
Well, we don't have a sheet that says to do that. We don't know how to do that, or we can't do that, or why don't you take 3 minutes and make a new stock number for us? Or
Right.
but I have let them know of my intention to get other sizes,
Yeah.
you know, that are at least in the New Sonic line.
Sure.
They make a 20-inch New Sonic bass drum. They make a 14-inch New Sonic tom, and
Yeah.
I want
Oh,
this. They
floor
make a
tom,
10-inch.
14 floor. They make a 14 floor.
Just not in this finish.
Right.
Right.
So what I have to get them to do is take the other finish's stock number and insert this finish, you know,
Yeah.
code on it. So now there's a new stock number.
Right.
You know what? I'm sure it'll be fine. If not, next year you will see Jenkins Martin Blameyer. No, not true. Not true.
Just kidding.
Just kidding.
Bob Henry,
No,
if you're listening, Uli, if you're listening, no, we're just
Bob Uli,
joking.
no, Mike Nealon, no, Josh, no, just you know, Ryan, just kidding.
But,
That's a pretty cool finish, though. I really like those.
Yeah.
That's a nice
I really
finish.
want to take these drums out, and if we're still under COVID rules, I'll just
Wear that with it.
goes right with it.
John, I don't want to take any more of your time. Number one, I want to thank you. Number two, I do want you to come back maybe in a couple weeks or so, whenever you're convenient, and let's talk some Hal Blaine stories. I would love to do that for the show.
Okay.
But ending up, can you give us 3 or 4 songs that you're like, you know, Ringo always says that he loves Rain. He loves his drum parts on Rain. Is there anything, 2 or 3 songs you can think of, you go, dang, I nailed that?
Boy, that's the hardest question, and you would imagine I'd have an answer after having been asked for, you know, a lot of years. What's your favorite song, or to play with Al, or you know, what's your favorite song to drum, or whatever. And I really don't have a specific answer. I mean, I guess I'm proud of a couple of things. I'm proud of this one for a weird reason. There's a song called Virus Alert, which was on our album in 2006. Oddly enough, called Virus Alert, but not like a bacterial virus, but a computer virus. And it's an homage to the group Sparks. So it's an original song, but you would listen to that and you think that sounds like it could be Sparks. That's got some of the same, you know, lines and sort of the same kind of keyboard sounding parts and stuff like that. Anyway, that song was played live, and most of the Sparks songs were. David Kendrick was their drummer, and most of those songs were played, you know, like the Devo songs. You think, well, you know, those are all Lindrum sounds, but Alan Myers was playing all those parts.
Yeah,
you know, that was all really played, and a drummer can feel that. So this was a song that we played, you know, as a band, that was played live. But I really, for what, you know, and you know, big surprise, we cut stuff to a click, and I'm really good with the click. I was really good on this song. You absolutely would think the part had been programmed. It is that.
Oh wow!
It's that dead on, and I mean, I'm really proud of that because I sound like a machine. It's like, well, is that something to be proud of? So, well, that's, you know, means I stayed with the click. You know, so yeah.
Which is hard to do, you guys.
Yeah.
That's hard to really do, to not, you know, I mean,
well,
for me anyway. But.
Well,
what makes you a professional? Absolutely.
Well, it depends. I mean, I've got a certain way, and the mix, you know, as in any performance, the mix is absolutely critical to how well you play. And there are, you know, I keep telling drummers, say, well, I can't work to a click. You know, I had this mix in, and we tried to put a click in, and it was just too much stuff, and I couldn't play to it. And it was always slowing down, or what, you know, or whatever. Or I would move a little bit, and then everybody else would start to go with me, and then I'd get confused. So the mix, when you're working, you know, either live or in the studio, when you're working with a click, the click is the most important thing. You have to hear the click really above everything else. The click is like maybe 75% of what is in your ears, and then your drums, your kick and snare, maybe your hi-hat or your cymbal, wherever you're keeping time, maybe that's another, you know, 15%, just so you can match it up to that. But you got to be able to hear that click to stay with that. You know, if you don't need to hear your drums. In fact, if you don't hear your drums, you're on the click. You're burying the click, or the click is burying you, whatever. Then you know you're on it. And then the rest of it can be, you know, if you know, your melody or whatever, or lyrics, if Al is doing a rough vocal track or whatever, you know, that's fine. That's the least of your worries, you know. But once you know the song, the goal is to be on that click. So you listen to the click. It's not your job to hear a fancy mix. You'll hear that when the CD comes out.
Right.
You know, it's not your job on stage to hear what the audience plays. You know, if you don't, you know, I hear my drums in the click, a little bit of Al's vocal. That's pretty much it.
That's it.
I mean, if there's a track or a click or whatever. And that's what I need to hear in order to do the gig. It's not, nobody would want to hear what I hear in my phone. And everyone's got different mixes. It's really weird. Everyone's got a weird mix. But nobody's up there just to hear themselves play. They're up there to make sure that we're locked in. I hope everyone else is listening to me, but I'm listening to the click. And everyone, because the click is tied to the video.
Yeah.
So if I'm with the video, I'm doing my job. And to my credit, I've never ever lost the click. I've never
awesome.
in such a way that you could tell. I mean, I could tell if I'm 10 milliseconds off, because I can hear a little bit of flamming, a little bit of doubling, and then I immediately my mind wandered for a split second. Sorry, but I'm never like an eighth note off or a 16th note off. I mean, I'm never off. They've never had to stop the click because I got off, or I've never got so far off that I had to pull back and it was a train wreck. Nothing like that ever happened, and that's because I hear what I need to hear to play with it.
That's a good thing. I mean,
and it is a good thing. I mean, I figured that out a long time ago. It's like I'm having trouble playing with the click because I can't hear it. I guess I better turn it up. I guess everything else that's fighting the click, I guess I'll lower that.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of stuff competing in my head. And then it struck me. Then it's like, well, if you need to hear the click, you need to hear the click. It's not your job to hear what the audience hears. They're going to hear a good mix.
Sure.
And they're not going to hear the click, mind you. So that's how. So that song Virus Alert is a really good example of how I'm dead on it. And there was a video for that song. So if anyone wants to look up Virus Alert on YouTube, they can hear it and hear what I did. And there's even a little break in there that's a little drum break. Doom, 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 pop, doom. Oh, speaking of Hal Plain, there's a little quick thing like that where I'm just like in the clear, and it's like it sounds like a damn machine. I mean, it's just dead on. The strokes are even, the snares are. It's just, you would think it was programmed. And
that's awesome.
And it wasn't. And there's parts I programmed where you wouldn't mistake them for playing live. I mean, program parts are generally they're a little too, they're sterile, they're consistent.
Yes.
Yes, they're too perfect.
They have to be that way. If we're parodying a song that had a programmed part, that's what we do, because that's our job, is to not just emulate, but to copy that song. So I've learned a lot with Al, and there's a lot of program stuff I'm very proud of, just for being able to dig into somebody's original. And so a lot of these dance and hip hop tracks are very, very produced. And you got to have a really good ear. I got a pretty good ear. And I'm very proud of some of those things that I've been able to dig out these parts, match sounds, match parts.
That's got to be difficult. Yeah.
It's you got to have a good ear. And in the case of matching sounds, and this isn't like, I'll just pull these off of a drum machine, disc or something. These are songs that are like cooked up, that are just made up, that are layered. Hand claps and rim clicks with a snare now become the new snare. And it's like, where did they get that sort of cloppy snare? It's like, well, because there's a dark rim click on there, or there's a single hand clap on there that's matched right up with it.
Right on. Yeah.
So the snare doesn't sound like that, but a snare with a click and a clap, now that becomes a new back. And
that's the name of our new album. That's it. A snare with a clip and a clap.
and the way I figured that stuff out is, excuse me. I listen carefully, and it's not enough. It would be helpful, but it's not really important that I know how they made that sound. It's just important that I can hear what's in it and figure out, well, I would do that. Sounds like a hand clap thing that's maybe been slowed down or shortened, or it's got whatever put on top of this kind of a snare. There's a little bit of an attack on there. And then maybe I'll look at the file. There's not enough of a click, so maybe I'll just expand the very beginning and just spike that, so it's got a little bit of a click at the top. And it's just, I'm able to go in and recreate something that sounds about 90-95% just like that. I will say,
that's impressive.
I got to say, there's one time, and we've been accused a few times of going and using the original track and Al singing over it, which is a great compliment, because we've never done that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we did once, but I'm not going to tell you when. And not by request, but it was the author of the song in getting permission for the song says, well, I'll send you the multi-tracks. And Al's like, oh, that'd make life easier. Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a long time ago. I did one time get the sound for a song. This was Imagine Dragons, Radioactive. We were doing a song called Inactive, a guy that just like lays around all the time.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all heavily produced. Yeah. And I had all of the parts I wanted in there. I got it, a lot of it was just kind of keyboard pads and other things going on, which our guitar player took care of. but I always programmed the drum and percussion parts. So I'm struggling with the snare part, and I just can't quite, there's something about it I couldn't quite, it just didn't sound, granted I'm hearing it raw and, comparing it what it might sound like in the context of the track. And I had it like maybe 80% there, and I thought, I know this isn't it, but it might be okay. I'm going to try something. I'm going to reach out to the drummer in Imagine Dragons. So I did, and I didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks. And I thought, what, we're getting close. I got to have my, I create the entire song in the drum part. I create stems for each of the parts. Right. I said, I better just go in and I'll give them that, and maybe they can do something in the studio with it. Anyway, I went back to the computer, and I had got an email that morning from the guy who says, yeah, I'm happy to help. We're big fans. We love you guys. Our bass player saw you in Denver back in '92 or whatever. He's got a picture with Al. Anyway, the guitar player from the group sent me a stem of the actual snare part.
Oh, wow.
From Radioactive. Now, not only does it has a reverse buildup, but there's all this, and listening to it, there's kind of this filtering stuff, and it does this little kind of, you hit it and it goes, it does all these little things. There's a little break in the lead up. It goes, it doesn't just lead up into it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's completely different than what I had. And it's like, this makes it, this really.
Right.
So here we have the actual real
That's cool.
Dragon snare sound on our song Inactive. And when I send it into the engineer, and I also let Al know, and Al's the producer of his own records now, I said, do not touch the snare part. Don't try to flatten it. Don't EQ it. Don't do anything. This is the part that wound up on their record. This is the part. Don't so that was very cool. So we had them come see us. The drummer and the bass player came to see us play in Las Vegas. They were based in Las Vegas, and came out and said hi. And it was very cool. So that's the one time I probably didn't need help, but I really wanted help because I wanted to get it right. I really wanted to get it right. And that's the one time I thought, I really need to reach out. It's the only way this is going to not sound, half-assed.
Right.
I really didn't want to do anything that wasn't quite right. And I nailed a lot of stuff, but I needed a little help on that. And, I proudly, I tell that story. I mean, he was a great help to.
That's awesome. That's
very
cool.
nice of him to arrange that. So speaking of sounds. Okay.
Well, John, you know what? I want to thank you for taking the time. And again, we'll be in contact in a couple weeks. I do want to set you down if you're available, and we'll do some Hal Blaine, some more drummer stories. Thanks for hanging out in the garage with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think I got some time, and I will also then tell you about my book.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's for another.
Well,
I'll tell you about Hal Blaine in the book. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, now I do know that you're the kind of the historian of the band, correct? You have a lot of that stuff, archivist. Is that correct?
This is but this is not just collectibles or memorabilia. This is photographs that I shot of Al. I always had a camera with me. I mean, I had a camera with me back in the 70s, everywhere I went. And I always shot color, except I returned to my roots. I returned to my black and white roots for a time with Al on some video sets, and never ever printed those. I had contact sheets made. Of course, I kept the negatives in good condition. They just sat in a file cabinet all these years. I mean, Al had never even seen them. And the fans have seen a lot of photographs that I've shot over the years on websites and in books, but they've never seen these. So these are, and Al has approved it. Al wrote a foreword for the book. The book is coming out, I believe, in October. And,
nice.
The fans are going to get to see a lot of stuff they've never seen before. And I'll leave it at that. I'll tell you more about it next time.
Awesome.
For the next installment.
For the next installment.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Hopefully I'll be able to tell you the title at the time. I mean, we have the title. I just it's not out yet, so I can't really tell you. Actually, I'll tell you a real quick thing. This was the title I originally had, and the original title was, these are all black and white photos, right? It don't matter if they're black and white. Now, that's like the Michael Jackson song a little bit, right? Yeah. So that was my title. Then the subtitle, the subtitle was going to be Unseen Photos from the Camera of John Bermuda Schwartz. And I thought, we'll market this directly to Al fans, of course. So, I think it don't matter. That's the old Michael Jackson reference. Right. In fact, we even did a parody of Black or White back in the day. And I got hooked up with the publisher, and the publisher, after about a month, of of chewing on that says, well, you know, there's the whole Michael Jackson thing has kind of resurfaced a little bit. Maybe that reference is not a good reference. We don't want a single bad review on Amazon or anything
Right.
like that. You know, I thought, well, that's, you know, I guess that's right, because on the last tour, in fact, in 2019, we nixed the Michael Jackson songs. We didn't do Eat It or Fat,
Yeah.
which normally we would do on a tour
Sure.
in the show, and for that very reason. And it hadn't even occurred to me. So this is, you know, a real publisher telling me this versus if you self-publish, they might not have said that. And
Right.
and you know, I thought, well, okay, that's good. I actually had another title in my back pocket, which I gave to him, which I'll tell you hopefully next time. And then the other thing he says, yeah, this other thing, this John Bermuda, you know, you don't mention Weird Al anywhere on there. I said, well, you know, I figured we'll just market it to Al's fans. You know, they'll figure it out. He says, well, what if someone's searching on Amazon? It would be great if this book came up in their search. Maybe they'll buy a book. I thought, oh, that's pretty smart. He put Al's name in the title. Wow, that's cool.
That's why they're publishers.
So there's a better, arguably a better title and a better subtitle now, and hopefully I'll be able to tell you that next time we talk.
Awesome.
So I'll leave it at that.
Very cool.
All right, you've been listening to The Garage Door, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
John. Hey, that was awesome.